Hey, good afternoon, everyone. We're all set to start. Some of you are still joining in. We'll just wait for maybe one more minute. Great. In the meantime, some housekeeping rules. So this webinar will be close to 35 to 40 minutes in duration. Post that we can take up any question and answers. And for question and answer, you can see an icon in your webinar view. You can post your questions and we will be able to take that up during the end of the webinar. We wanted to do this webinar in a much more fun and interesting way. So if you can open up your phones and scan this QR code, or on your desktop, just open this URL which you see on this slide, ahaslides.com/the code which is mentioned here, or easier way to do is to just scan the QR code. Great. We will show this QR code again during the webinar if people who have not done it, or people who will join a bit late can do it again. So in the interest of time and for people who have joined, we will get started. Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for finding time for this webinar. So each year at pCloudy, we publish and last year, 2020, the report that we published was a huge success. In fact, we published two reports, and both were hugely accepted within the industry. And that encouraged us much more detail. This webinar will give you a gist of what the trends that we see in the industry. Before we talk about the trend, let me give you a bit of introduction about myself. So my name is Avinash Tiwari. I'm co-founder of Smart Software Testing Solutions. And our flagship product, pCloudy, serves more than 150K users globally. 5 years back, I was working with a prospective customer from Boston, US. Let's name him Brian for this discussion. So Brian was the digital head of a large insurance company with teams across the globe in countries like Mexico, India, and Japan. And during one of the calls, when I was trying to understand his pain points, he mentioned that it's a winter storm in Boston, and the roads are all snow filled and no one can go to office. So all his developers and testers are working from home. This is 5 years back. And he was frustrated with the efficiency loss for his app dev and test teams because his device test lab was not accessible remotely. He wanted remote access of the lab immediately for all his teams, not only the teams which are in Boston, but the teams which were located across the globe. And his eventual vision was to replace manual testing effort by enabling continuous automation runs as part of the DevOps implementation. I was fortunate enough to work with him. And after a few years, he made a statement during one of the feedback calls. And the statement was that today, sun never sets on my QA. There couldn't have been a better testimony from a customer, apart from the numbers that you can talk about in terms of ROIs, in terms of efforts saved. But the statement that now sun never sets on my QA, I am able to operate 24/7 seamlessly across all the teams which are geographically located. It was a big testimony for us as a product. And in this journey, pCloudy played a big role in this transition for the customer. So this was possible because the customer, Brian in this case, um, could foresee the trends early on and looked for right tools and platforms. Right? So our objective always has been to come up with these trends to give you more insights in a much more concise and crisp way, um, so that you can take those insights and start implementing it and be an early adopter. Like in our case, Brian was clearly an early adopter. He saw the need of remote testing 5 years back, and now as part of pandemic, we are seeing need of remote testing almost everywhere. So be an early adopter and use the trends to benefit individually, as well as make sure that your organization benefits from it. So that's the whole objective of bringing these kind of reports. And that's the philosophy we have followed as part of our product development as well, to align our product roadmap with the trends that we see, which are coming from directly from the industry. To give you a sense of how we did this report, we talked to almost 100 of our customers, more than 100 customers, and collected a lot of data around what are the pain points, what are the techniques that they are using, and based on that, we have generated this report. So it's not something which is completely coming from someone's thought. It is validated data coming from the industry. You can call it voice of the industry. So with this, let's see what is there inside the report. And before we do that, what we have seen, I mean, in last 5 years, while working with, while developing pCloudy as a product, we saw two uh, uh, key areas. I mean, first, from the side of the users, and we always see that users are only worried about the quality, right? Especially when it comes to the applications, mobile or web applications, their main concern is the quality and experience of the product uh, or the service that you're releasing. And from the business side of it, now in the current situation, it's all about speed. How do I reach out to the customer in a faster way? How do I reach out to the customer faster than my competition? So it's this intersection between quality and speed uh, is what makes any organization successful. And that is where we operate in. So when we talk about quality from the user point of view, it's all about holistic view of the quality. In case of especially applications, it's all about having a seamless view across different interfaces like mobile, desktops, nowadays wearables, smart devices. Um, the consumer experience, the seamless experience is extremely key. And when it comes to the business side of it, the speed, how do we reduce the human effort? How do we scale up the automation? How do we finish the testing faster than ever? So these are the challenges or the problem statement that comes into play. So this intersection between quality and speed is what we operate in, and that is where pCloudy comes into play to enable you to achieve quality at speed. Right. So in a nutshell, to talk about what is pCloudy. So sorry for the interruption here. So talk a little bit about what pCloud is a product is. Some of you might be aware already, but some of you who are new to pCloudy, uh, we are a continuous testing platform uh, which enables organizations to achieve quality at speed, right? And we do it in a way where we enable organizations to create remote testing infrastructure in terms of device and browser labs. We enable organizations to achieve rapid automation and then use this automation at scale when you execute it, uh, backed by solid test analytics and DevOps plugins. Uh, you can achieve your continuous testing goals and be part of a DevOps journey. So that's what pCloudy as a product is. We have had a great journey in last 5 years. We have more than 150K users across the globe. 500 plus companies are already using our product, out of which more than 30 plus are Fortune 500 clients. And we have been recognized by analysts from Gartner's, Forrester, and also has a very high rating on platforms like G2 Crowd, which is an independent review platform. We work with companies across the board. You can see different names across variety of industries like media, ed tech, telecom, insurance, e-commerce, and some of the names are very, very recognizable. So we work with startups to big enterprises, um, and help them in their app testing journeys. So with this background um, about pCloudy, let's just quickly understand about you as well, that who are you. So that's where I said, if you have scanned the QR code, if you have not, I'll just show the QR code again so that you can do it now if you haven't. Please do it, because it'll be much more fun. We would like to understand your view along the way we are, along the way when we are presenting the data. You can also validate your thoughts before you see the data. So I would encourage all of you to just quickly scan and be part of this discussion. So we'll just wait for a few seconds more before we jump into the next slide. Okay, hope you have done that. And if that's the case, we will move to the main agenda. Okay. So the first question was, where are you from? So I can see people saying Bangalore, Chennai, Noida. There are people from London, Spain, Delhi. Good to see a global audience here. As I said, we have customers from across the globe. Um, great, great to see this word cloud coming up. A majority of you seems to be from India, Bangalore. Great to see. Great, that gives us a good sense of where are you located. The next question is, what role do you play? Great, we already have answers here. So close to 15% are the leaders. Then we have, yeah, good number of people from the management layer, and equally good number of people from the specialized areas, the experts. Awesome. So this again gives us a good sense of the breakup. And if you can just quickly point out what industry are you from? IT, healthcare, fintech. Just what is your industry that you're working? Okay, automobile, IT, fintech. Okay, IT, information technology. Come on, go ahead. Just do it as quickly as possible. Health tech, pharma. Great. So again, we can see the variety of the audience here. That makes it much more worthy of the discussion. Uh, as I said in the beginning, our customers are across various domains, so that also reflects the diversity here. Great. So now that we know you, just a quick sense of how many of you are already working on apps? Is app part of your regular development or testing, or you are from some other area? It looks like most of you are from the app teams. Awesome, awesome, 100%. So good to see this. Great. So keep the QR code on. You will get many more questions along the way, and you'll be able to validate some of the thoughts that you have in mind and what you see the trend from the industry. Great. So let's begin. When the pandemic started, it's been almost a year, we all switched to the world of digital very quickly. Though digital has been there in the as a buzzword from quite some time, but it got a big push during the pandemic. And the new normal that we see is more and more usage of the apps across various industries. So you can look at this data. Every industry, be it streaming to shopping to business, education, saw a big jump in the usage of the app. So as I mean, all of you are part of the app teams. We all can be very proud of the fact that app industry is going to grow, and usage of apps across various industries is going to be the new normal. So it brings all the more responsibility on all of us to make sure that the experience of the app, the features which the customers require, reach faster than ever. Again, similar data that the time spent on the business apps specifically has increased dramatically. The time spent has grown by 275% at the end of 2020. Right? And you can see a very steep rise. And again, you can link it to the pandemic and the way situation changed everywhere. You don't have any other option but to choose the digital side of uh, the business, and app becomes the forefront when we talk about the digital side. So again, that's the new normal that we are seeing. And lastly, one good trend that we saw across the industry was the usage of hybrid apps. There's been a lot of debate around which is more popular, native, hybrid. Now progressive web is coming up, but still across the industries, the usage of hybrid app has been more than any other category. So that again is a good data point for us in terms of what kind of apps would we see from the testing perspective, which will come our way. So that's a data point that you can take up and plan your future testing strategies or future development strategies. Now, let's get on to the real trend that you're talking about. Just before that, one more question. If you can just go to your phone or on your tab where you have scanned it. When would you not use an app or give it a bad rating? What are the reasons because of which you will give a bad rating of the app? Just type and let's see what comes out. Crash. Okay, great. Is that the main reason? Low response time. Awesome. UI lag. UI not great. Awesome. Performance. Yeah, a lot of it is common. Performance, lag, low response time, crash, interface, user friendly. Great. I think we all are in sync as far as these issues are concerned. Um, a similar question on the same lines. Okay, I think we are already done with that question. So what we saw in the industry is very similar to what we saw as a result from your answers. What the biggest reason of uninstalling of apps is app crashes. 71% of the times the crash leads to uninstalling of apps from the user's machine. And the reason of abandoning of apps, the excessive load time or the low response time that you all talked about. Almost 70% says that that's the main reason. And we have talked at length in various other webinars, or there are papers that we have published as to why app crashes happen, especially for the apps. Why is it is so important to test your apps across a variety of devices, and how do you really choose the right set of devices? I'm not going to talk about that right now. You can always go, if you go to our blogs or if you're following our LinkedIn pages, you would have seen those kind of articles. If not, go to our blog pages and see those articles. You can search for why app crashes, and you will find a very scientific way of finding out which devices should we choose so that we can minimize the app crashes. So that's the big reason, and we are, as per your responses, the industries also feels the same way. Now, as far as the trend agenda is concerned, there are areas that we are going to focus on. So again, a question: how can you speed up your release cycle? Any thoughts? So is it that you will do automation? What are the ways that you speed up your release cycle? We talked about quality and speed. So automation is one area, faster testing. Automation is something which many of you are repeating. Network security, okay. Speed with network security, that's a interesting one. Early testing, adopt DevOps, continuous testing. Yeah. Awesome. I think it gives us a sense of what your thoughts are. Shift left, continuous test, simultaneous process on both dev and test. Yeah, continuous test is one big um, area that comes out of it. Good. What we see from our survey, what industry is doing, especially after the pandemic, right? Last 1 year, this is the data which you can relate it to the last 1 year work of the organizations. So over 60% of the organization are implementing continuous testing methodology vigorously to scale up their testing strategy, right? So, and if you kind of see the further data that we are going to talk about, that validates the thought further. But what we are seeing is an increasing trend in terms of adoption of continuous testing. And again, we have done many more webinars on continuous testing, specifically how to implement and how to do it in a much more holistic way. But one thing I want to make it very clear right now is a lot of times continuous testing, people perceive it as, okay, I'll run my automation scripts with some CI tool that brings or that implements the continuous testing for me. That's a complete myth. Continuous testing is a very holistic view of how do we automate testing at each stage, be it your deployment to your unit testing to your regression as well as your production monitoring. So it's a complete gamut of the automation that you have to look at, and you have to automate at various places to achieve continuous testing. So what we are seeing is an increasing trend. We still are quite far in terms of 100% of organizations implementing continuous testing. And as I said, a complete holistic view of continuous testing is still missing in a lot of places. So people have started adopting to continuous testing early, but yeah, they have long way to go. And the data that we see next supports that fact, that one of the key pillars of continuous testing is your automation coverage. Now, what we see here is still 52% of organizations are having 60% or less automation. Only 22% are having automation in the range of 80 to 100%. And that's where we all have to be. If we are looking at continuous testing, we all have to be there in that 80 to 100% category. And there are various ways to increase or enhance the coverage of the automation. It need not be just functional way of automation only. There are a lot of strategies in terms of functional API, your unit tests, as I said, production monitoring automation. So it's a complete kind of gamut of things that you will have to do to make sure that you reach that stage. So organizations, even though they have started implementing continuous testing, the automation coverage is low, which is a concern. And we definitely see that organizations are putting more focus on the coverage, but until unless we reach that category of 80 to 100%, continuous testing will not be um, complete, and you'll start failing. Another data point which is very important for continuous testing implementation is test environment orchestration. Now, along with automation, until unless you have automated your test environment creation, you still cannot achieve continuous testing, right? So that's very, very critical in terms of uh, your CI/CD deployment itself. So we see that almost 60% of organizations are already using, which is a very encouraging sign, but still almost 40% are somewhere there. Um, but if you have to, again, achieve continuous testing, test orchestration is one of the key pillars. So automating the test environment provisioning through either Dockers or any other techniques that you can use to automate is something very much required. And again, we have a lot of further material that you can read. How do we do the test environment orchestration? But for the time being, this data point will give you a sense of where you are and where the industry is and where you are, which category you fall in. So this is the trend one. One, definitely we see that the continuous testing is on the rise, but there are certain concerns in terms of the low automation coverage, and also still the test environment orchestration is not um, have not reached near to 100%. So these two areas, most of the organizations have to work on, and a data point for all of you. So adopting continuous testing is going to be a vital part of test strategy to speed up the app release. That's the message from the trend one. Now we'll move to the next part of it. And again, you can go back to your phones or your tabs and answer that question. How dependent are you on the tools for work? So is it like you are completely 100% dependent, or some part of it is still manual, some part of it you can do it without the tools? What's the status? Go ahead, just uh, based on your experience, just answer it. Okay. So 25% of you are saying that I can complete a significant amount of work without any tools. That's quite surprising. 11% say I cannot work if any of my tools fail, and 50 is almost 55%. I can complete some amount of work without any goals. So this figure is quite surprising, that you can still complete significant amount of work without any tools. That's a very risky territory, considering the current situation we are in. The dependency on the tools is very high, and one of the reasons we were able to, as an organization, I can tell you our experience, one of the reasons why we were able to switch to a complete remote work environment once the pandemic hit within few days, because we were using most of the tools on cloud. We had hardly we were hardly using any physical infrastructure in our offices and all, so we could just switch to remote working within few days. And that's the kind of agility you need within an organization going forward, considering the dynamic nature of the work environment or the business environment that we see in. So this 36% is a bit of risky zone. Let's see what the industry says. Before that, uh, the question, so are you able to access those tools remotely? So whichever tools are you using, are you able to access it remotely, or all these are still physical? Okay. So again, the percentage, it's quite balanced, it's quite mixed. It's almost 50-50. That's awesome. Cool. So let's see what the industry has to say about it. When we ask the customers what is the current situation and how pandemic impacted their usage of the tools, um, almost 15%, and that was the kind of percentage we saw in the survey also, that 15% were totally dependent on the tools. And again, those tools are completely on SaaS, which means they have adopted the cloud in a complete way. 60% saw a significant shift on cloud as far as their tools are concerned. 26% moderate, and 3% no shift. So that's why I was saying that if in the responses that we saw, if 30% of you or 35% of you were saying that I can still work without tool, that's a bit of risky territory, because industry is moving towards a stage where you have to use cloud-based tool. It could be internal cloud, it could be external cloud. That depends on the organization situation, the kind of security policies and regulatory environment that you have, but it needs to be accessed remotely in a cloud environment. That's the key message here. And you can see the data point and relate to it. So what this means for us, as I said, I don't want to repeat here that as the industry is moving and the dynamic work situation that we see, the cloud is the key, or cloud is the game. As I said, it could be internal or external cloud, but you need to start thinking about moving your tools on the cloud as quickly as possible. I mean, we saw many of the, in fact, most secured customers, pharma, or even banks started using the public cloud that we have. I mean, earlier they were so rigid about not looking at public cloud at all, but now they have adopted to the public cloud. So there is a lot of shift that we are seeing in terms of the mindset, in terms of adoption of the cloud within even the most regulated and the most secured environments. So you need to start looking at that. Okay, next question. So second trend was about the usage of the cloud across different tools. Third trend, we will look at what the third trend is. What are some of the technology that you use in organization to reduce human intervention? We talked about speed as one of the key driving factor for businesses. So how do you achieve speed? Is it automation? How do you reduce human intervention? What are the new ways that you're trying? Automation tools, great. Automation, yeah. Any other area that you see coming up? RPA, great. Load testing tools, awesome. DevOps, okay. Scriptless platforms, okay. AWS, automation tools, okay. No code platforms, okay. Okay, let's see what we saw. So I agree. I mean, some of most of it is right. Automation is the key, right? When we talk about reducing human intervention, automation is the key. But what we saw, what are the new areas that people are looking at as far as the automation is concerned? Automation is have to be in place. Uh, at least we talked about 80 to 100% of automation in terms of your functional unit. Testing has to be there. But how do we speed this up further, right? Is the question most of the organizations are struggling with, because automations are still quite fragile in a lot of cases. So what we saw was use of AI. A lot of organizations have started using AI to improve their automation in different areas. And this gives you a sense of which are the areas where organizations or the companies have started using AI. So test management, test automation is a big chunk of it. Um, Identifying behavior pattern. And since it's a multiple choice question, I mean, that's the reason the percentages are different. Um, uh, Automation, as I said, is a big piece of it. Then test coverage, predictive analysis um, are some of the areas where customers are already using AI to improve their efficiencies, right? To give you a sense of what we do as far as the AI is concerned. So we have been able to create bots. Some of you talked about RPAs. So we have been able to create bot for mobile app testing, which means you just pass on your APKs and the bot will traverse through the application and will do the testing completely on its own. So that's the kind of automation we look at. You don't even have to write scripts. The bot can identify the patterns or the flows within the application and perform a lot of testing. Of course, uh, there are areas where the bot cannot do testing, but at least 50 to 60% of coverage you can achieve with bot, and rest can be done through scripts. So that's the way you can further speed up your automation. So you have to look at techniques beyond what is available right now. And that is where, especially in the test automation, one area where you can really apply AI is the visual uh, testing. So apart from functional testing or the backend testing that we do for our applications, when we talk about the consumer experience, the visual part becomes very key. And especially on the application side, you have to test it across a variety of devices, the layout, the colors, how does it look? That visual testing is a very cumbersome task, and that really a lot of time defines the experience of the app when it goes in the hand of consumer. A lot of you answered that question as to UI plays a big role, right? So visual AI can play a big role in improving your automation and bringing additional layer of automation coverage through use of AI in the visual testing automation. And there are a lot of tools coming in the market. We have done a lot of work, but my suggestion is to think about uh, utilizing some of the material available in the market to start using visual AI for your testing. Google has extremely well developed visual AI APIs which you can directly use and start automating your testing. So that's a key trend that we saw. A lot of organizations have already adopted it. Apart from that, you can start looking at other areas like test management, test coverage to start implementing AI and further improve it. That's the third trend that we saw, use of AI. Now we are moving to the fourth. Um, Again, a question to all of you. What's your take on the low code app development and testing platforms? Can it increase the speed of your testing or app development? This is something very, very interesting. I really want to see what your thought is. Awesome. So 80% of you say that. I'm confident they will. Great. Looks like there are less number of developers in the crowd. Well, that's where we get a lot of resistance. But yeah, and this gives us a good perspective, and it kind of aligns with the trend that we see. So Gartner predicts that 66% of enterprises will use some kind of low code platform by 2024. Because organizations really want to focus on the business value creation rather than focusing on the coding part of it, and the techniques of AI and all is really helping in terms of speeding up the development itself by automating a lot of code creation, right? And it also helps in creation of multi-platform applications. So you don't have to write separate code for Android and iOS. You just uh, create your components, and then it spins out the code automatically for both Android and iOS, and also maybe for smartwatches for other platforms. So that's where the low code platforms comes into play. And it's going to play a big role in the overall app development industry itself. And same thing we are seeing in the case of automation as well. I mean, if you look at the journey over the last 4 or 5 years, the usage of open source tools have been on the rise, especially in the app industry. For example, Appium plays a big or has a big chunk of the overall automation piece as far as the mobile apps are concerned, and same with Selenium. So open source tools have been kind of dominating the market, but we are seeing now increasing demand of the low code tools because enterprises are realizing that automation cannot be in silo. It can't be given to one team which is expert in coding, right? We need all our test teams or dev teams to code as they develop, and that can only happen when the automation uh, is faster, can be done without writing too much of code. You just need to know the business logic and you should be able to write the script. So that's where the low code platforms are again on the rise in the automation space. So if you're planning your automation strategy, you can start thinking about whether the low code platforms can be used in your situation. So low code can be also called scriptless. Whatever is the terminology that you want to use, that's fine. But that's something is on the rise. Still, a large percentage of it is on the open source platform, but yeah, we are seeing a rise, which is aligned to what uh, we are seeing the trend in the development space. So that's one big trend that we saw. Um this is going to be the kind of last trend, fifth one that we are seeing. So again, a question: what are the digital channels that your organization's focuses on? Is it app? Is it web? Is it your smartwatches? So what are the different channels that you are using for your app? Is it just one interface, or you have multi-interface, web, mobile, app, web, mobile, smartwatches? Yeah, great. Okay, so that gives us a sense. Now, what we see is, yeah. So what we see here is, as you rightly, as you all of you rightly suggested in the answer of your question, there are multi platforms for the same application, and that's one of the business advantage any organizations or any business wants to get to target their customers across multiple interfaces. So the the trend that we have seen is, again, uh, uh, customers are building more hybrid apps, and they're not only restricted to mobile and web. The interfaces across wearables, smart speakers, Alexa, Siri, all those interfaces are kind of on the rise. And as part of the testing, again, you have to start planning how do we do this multi-interface testing, because testing only on single interface is not good enough. Now there are applications where customers can do some order on from their smartwatch and then go and track it on their mobile phones. So there has to be a seamless experience between these two interfaces, and until unless we are testing it from the consumer point of view, how they're using the application across these two interfaces, will not be able to execute those scenarios. And if the experience is bad, the application will fail. And very interesting example is the Pizza Hut Anywhere delivery. You can search on the internet and find out how they implemented almost more than 15 interfaces for their pizza application delivery, be it from the Slack application to mobile to smartwatch to a button in the kitchen which can enable pizza delivery. So that's the kind of environment we are in, where you have to think about multi platform application development uh, to serve the need of the consumer. And that's where comes into uh, the new kind of testing strategy, which is the multi experience testing. Now, we have written a big uh, paper on how do you do multi-experience testing. You can go and take a look at it. But just to kind of sum it up, it's not about testing across interfaces. So you test your application, you test your web, you test your smartwatches. That's not multi-experience testing. Multi-experience testing is putting your customer um, in your view, and then thinking about end-to-end scenarios, and then planning how do you test it, right? So it could be, for example, in case of Starbucks, they look at how customer walks in the store, and then how they order it, how they then pick up the order and go back, how do they sit on the table, and how they walk outside the store and go into the car, and what kind of experience they have. So until unless you start looking at that holistic picture of your product or service, you'll not be able to think about a multi-experience testing scenario, right? So I'm just emphasizing here that multi-experience testing is not different interface testing. It's a complete customer journey mapping that you have to look at. So again, you can go and take a look at the article that we have written in. But this is the future of testing. If you are a mobile application tester, you start looking at how do I test other interfaces and create a complete integrated scenarios. If you're a web, how do I test others? So one skill set will not be enough as we go into the future. It is a multi-experience testing environment that we are in, and we can't live in the silo. So that's the fifth trend that we saw. So these were the 5 trends which we wanted to highlight. So the first trend that we saw was rise in adoption of continuous testing methodology, with 2 concerns like low coverage of automation and still slightly lower uh, side implementation of test orchestration. We saw increase in the testing infrastructure migration, and this is something extremely critical. If you have not done that, start thinking right now, because similar situation can arise again, and the businesses cannot survive this time. The businesses who are agile, who can just switch to any mode, is the kind of businesses who will survive going forward. Third trend was how do we speed up automation further? How can we add more layers of automation, which are not the traditional ones like functional or your unit testing? So that's where use of AI in the test management, in test coverage, in visual testing is something you start looking at. Uh, the fourth trend was usage of low code development platforms along with the low code automation platforms. So something you need to keep in mind if you are planning for future. How do I scale up my automation going forward? Should I keep it with one team which is in silo, or should I democratize it and start making sure that everyone participates in automation? And for that, low code tools can be a big asset. And lastly, the need of the multi-experience testing. We are living in era where we have to test across multi-platforms and look at consumer point of view rather than silo view of different interfaces. So that's the trend we saw. And one last kind of voice of industry, we asked, what are the top 3 challenges do you face in your organization? So this is the answer that we got. I mean, the top 3 are like increasing the percentage of test automation, and it kind of aligns with what we have been asking. Because if you are implementing continuous testing and your coverage is low, it's not in sync. Test infra automation is a big area of focus. Implementing continuous testing, the challenge is in focus right now. Again, scaling up your automation in the sense, how do I start running it? So creation is just one piece of it, but can I run it on maybe 50 devices together? Can I run it on 50 browser instances together, and still do it in maybe half an hour, 1 hour, depending on the kind of release cycle that you have? That's a big scaling up question organizations are facing. So these are some of the challenges that we saw, and I'm sure some of you would be kind of already working on these areas. So with these challenges and the insights that we showed you during the presentation, I hope you have certain pointers in your mind which you can go and implement it. If you have any questions, feel free to share your thoughts in the question and answer session, or you can always reach out to us for a more detailed discussion. We would love to hear your thoughts. We always look at sharing the knowledge, and it's always on the both ways. So we'd love to interact and get more insights from you. There are some additional resources that you can go and look at, and I would like really advise you to go and follow our LinkedIn pages, so that you can start getting these updates. And as I talked about, there are a lot of resources already available which you can go and read and get more insights on what we talked about. So thank you so much. Thanks for attending. If you have any questions, we have 5 minutes left. Feel free to just drop your questions in the question and answer session. We'll be able to take that up. So there is a question. Can you please briefly tell me about concept of cloud testing? So what, I mean, from our side, when we are saying that the tools have to be on the cloud. So just to give you an example, for mobile application testing, you can have a physical device lab. You can buy certain devices for your teams, keep it at one central place, and then people can access it. That's a very traditional way of using it. When we are saying you have to move to the cloud, it means that you need to take that device lab on the cloud. So either use maybe some of the existing cloud providers like pcloudy, who are uh, providing these access to the devices on a web browser from anywhere, or we can help you move this physical device infrastructure to a cloud. So you can still use your existing devices, but that will become an internal cloud for you, so that your teams from anywhere can start using it. That's just one example. Uh, Similarly, there are other tools like test orchestration. Maybe if you have a physical server where you are deploying your uh, test environment, you can move it to AWS, you can move it to maybe Azure, and then create scripts so that these happens automated and on cloud, which can be accessed from anywhere. So then you're not dependent on any physical infrastructure in your office, or if you have your own data centers, which is accessible from different locations. So the point is that uh, here, from my perspective, the meaning of cloud is you should be able to access it anywhere, and all your teams should be able to access that infrastructure, right, from anywhere. That's the kind of concept I talked about when I said cloud. Yeah, the question is around visual AI. That's a great question. Now, just to give you an example, let's say you have developed a e-commerce application, right? And it's a mobile app or a mobile web application. Now, if you open on a particular device, the on the right side there's a cart icon. Now, on one particular device, the cart icon looks small. On another device, it looks like slightly stretched. Now, how do you test this? Though the card functionality is working, the card functionality is working on both the devices, but on one particular device, it's stretched, it's blurred. On the other device, it's working fine. Now, if you have to compare it manually across, let's say, 20, 50 devices, depending on your customer segment, it's a huge effort. Can you automate it? Right? So what we are saying is that whatever you test through your eye, which cannot be automated right now, can be tested through visual AI. Now there are AI tools. For example, Google provides an API where you can train the API to say that this is the cart icon which is acceptable to me. So then the API will run and uh, find out if the cart icon matches on all the devices. If it doesn't, it will highlight. So as a report, you will get that, okay, these are the devices where the cart icon is not matching for me. So it's a complete image to image kind of comparison that happens rather than any functionality level. So functionality level automation you're already doing, but you can add a layer by doing these kind of visual verifications by means of AI. Earlier, the image comparison was very complex because AI was not in place. But now with the advanced techniques of AI, this visual comparison can happen in fraction of second. As I said, Google has I mean, big and one of the best libraries that you can get for visual comparison. So you can start using it. And there are automation tools also available in the market. We also have that capability where you can just give your base image and it will start comparing all your other interfaces and give you the report at the visual level. So that's what I meant about visual AI. Another question, what are some of the other ways that we can use AI in our testing strategy at the moment? So if you remember the slide, there are different areas like test management, test coverage, where AI can be used. So, for example, if you are using some tool where you are already capturing bugs, now if you start uh, analyzing those bugs and start kind of creating data patterns around it, uh, you can do a lot of impact analysis for your future releases. So if you, for example, if you have thousands of bugs, or maybe some of the large products can have more than 10,000 bugs. Now, if you analyze the data point and feed that into some kind of ML algorithm or AI algorithm, uh, any new feature release that comes, you can predict where the potential of failures are, and based on that you can start planning your testing. So rather than, I mean, right now the very standard technique is, okay, I have the regression suite, I'll run all 100% regression suites. That might take probably days to finish. But if I know that these are the potential areas where the failure can happen, and we have done that, I mean, that's called impact analysis. But that used to be a very manual kind of process. But now with the use of AI, you can do it in a much more predictable way, and you can analyze as much data as you can. Like if you have even maybe 50,000 bugs, you can analyze that. But once you, that's one time effort, but once you do that, you'll be able to predict where the potential bugs could be, and just focus on testing that area rather than doing a complete testing. So it can completely transform the efficiencies of your team. So there are a lot of such AI based techniques that can be used in testing. Visual AI is a big, as I said, uh, test coverage, predictive analysis. Predictive analysis is what I spoke. Both impact and predictive analysis falls under similar category. Um, so these are the areas where you can use AI to improve your testing. Another question is how scriptless platform will help in testing. Uh, Very interesting. What happens is, see, there are two strategies that you can take, right? One is, let's say you have a very dedicated automation team which is using the automation tools, maybe Appium, Selenium, to write the scripts, and then they pass it on to the other teams to start using it, or maybe they are responsible for execution. But that's not very scalable model because you are dependent on one team. What if in your agile environment, as and when features are developed, your manual testing team or your business users or your app developers itself can start writing the automation code, right? If you expect the business users or manual testing team to be expert at coding, it becomes quite challenging. But if you give them an interface where they can use their business knowledge, where they can use their product knowledge to create scripts, they'll be more than happy to do that. So while they're, the way they're writing their manual test cases, instead of writing manual test cases, they can write directly in the scriptless platform, and that will give you both your test case as well as your automation script. So that again changes the complete game. You can slowly start moving away from manual testing itself. Your manual testing team can become automation tester if you are able to use the scriptless platform effectively. And we have example in our cases, our customers have completely moved from manual testing to behavior driven development, behavior driven testing, and doing testing completely in an automated way using the tools. So it's definitely possible, and there are a lot of strategies that are already available. We can share more details on it. Another question, isn't it too early to implement low code or these scriptless development platform, or should we wait for a few more years? No, I mean, as I said, a lot of organizations have already started using it, and uh, the early adopters get the better advantage. The good part is the low code automation platforms are now quite mature, which was not the case 5 6 years back. So the movement that started 5 6 years back around scriptless automation development fizzled out because those platforms couldn't scale up. But now we have reached a situation where these platforms are quite capable, and again these platforms are using a lot of AI and all to generate these scripts much more effectively. Earlier the dependency was on uh, only object identification based on certain properties, but now these have evolved a lot, and that's where the scriptless platforms also have changed and much more mature, so that you can use it much more effectively. So we should start now. Early adopters, as I said, gets the most out of it. Um, so it's not a time to wait. Great. I think we have already exceeded the time. Thank you so much for being there with us. Great question and great interaction with all of you. Hope you got some insights or got some takeaways for you. Feel free to reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to answer any questions and connect with you. Thank you so much.